Welcome to Lashback, everyone. I'm Natalyan.
And I'm Phoebe. And this week we're going to talk about boy bands.
Yes, yes,
Tell me
yes. I
about boy
love
bands
boy
now.
bands. Yeah, I absolutely adore boy bands. And there's been so many different boy bands throughout the different, you know, generations, decades, and eras that have made a massive impact, whether that's personally or globally, like starting with the top of the list I've got here is, the Jackson 5 and the
Were
Beatles.
they were they the first boy band, technically?
I think the Beatles, don't quote me on this, Phoebe or listeners, but the Beatles were, in my opinion, I mean, there's other boy bands, but, real massive global success that's just not being reached other than, say, maybe One Direction or something, where they had that craze that
Yeah, and
was
like
just
people
insane.
people have learned English from the Beatles songs. So it's like their cultural reach is huge. So AI on Google tells me that the Jackson 5 are widely considered to be among the earliest example of boy band, particularly in the way that they incorporated musical elements and performance styles that would later
Mm.
become hallmarks of the genre. So, the harmonies and the choreography and stuff. Because actually that's the key
Yeah.
distinction is a boy band. Uh, a multiple number of singers, not instrumentalists as well. Because
Yeah, well,
the
that's a
Beatles
really
were
good
just a
point,
band.
actually.
The Beatles were just a
Yeah, the Beatles were
band.
probably yeah, Beatles were probably a band because they didn't do all like dance routines like say the Backstreet Boys that I adore.
Off in the head.
They have like like mm, actual. So that's probably a key distinction actually between a band and a boy band is that they might be able to play instruments, but that's not their performance
That's not what they're
model.
doing.
They
No,
sing,
indeed.
yeah, they sing and dance.
And you've made me think there about, I'm sorry to rolling out the feminist agenda here. But what's interesting about that is like the Beatles are just a band. But if the Beatles were all women, there might have been a girl band. Like it's female football. That's just football that women are playing. That
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah, no,
the if it's women doing it, it needs an extra kind of thing. So in a way, boy bands are Jackson 5 being first, and they dominated, didn't they? Were there anyone else in the 70s? Like, you know,
oh, there was loads, weren't there? There was loads like the Bay City Rollers. They were all
yeah,
boys, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
the
I mean,
Osmonds, the Monkeys.
yeah. But again, are they bands or boy bands?
Well, I think the Monkeys is interesting, and I'm not necessarily an expert, but I think they were manufactured by because this is another key distinction, I think,
Mm.
manufactured by the record company. So it's not a
Yeah,
band who have gone and got themselves a deal. It's a record company holding auditions to put together a
pulling them
band
together.
and
Yeah,
puts
like
them
again, the
together.
Backstreet Boys and One Direction,
Yeah,
definitively boy bands, whereas the Beatles all played together and then got
they
a
were
deal
mates.
because they played and wrote together. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
and the
think
Jackson
I
5.
think there is one band. There's a couple of bands where they're all brothers. So they've been, but they, in a way, it's that kind of sense of being recruited in order to be that band by the industry, as the girls are going to buy your records because you're all hot. I mean, I was a sucker at
Yeah,
13. Bros
yeah,
quickly dumped for New Kids on the Block. That was my
yeah,
early
yeah.
teens.
Well, the
Almost.
interesting thing as well about sibling bands, I've always said this about sibling bands, because of their genetics, their voices work amazingly together.
Oh,
One, genetics, and two, they've been raised together. So you've got, like the Jackson 5, the Hanson, Jonas Brothers. You're never going to beat that sound as siblings.
no, and
You're just never
anatomically
going
the
to beat
voices are similar. Yeah, yeah.
it. It just
So
works.
I
You're
was
never
thinking
going to
about
beat it.
I was thinking about this in terms of backing vocals. Like when I've recorded stuff, obviously
Mm,
it's nice to have different voices, like in choir kind of vibes. But when I've recorded stuff and I've done my own backing vocals, that's almost kind of otherworldly. It's ethereal
mm.
because that could never happen in real life without technology, with a loop maybe. But without technology, that sound of me singing in harmony doesn't happen. But when you've got sibling bands, you get close to that ethereal kind of sense of this shouldn't be happening at the same time, but it is. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. We were talking about this on a different episode or in between episodes, maybe, that, an album I'm doing, I'm pulling you in on backing vocals because our voices work well together. And I've always had this thing about, can I recreate this on stage? And you can't with yourself, unless, of course, again, you're looping or pre-recording. And I do actually sometimes, when I do my own backing vocals, I don't like it because it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like backing vocals. It sounds like one voice, which I don't necessarily want,
Yeah. I mean, it depends on
but
the
again,
genre a little bit. Like house music, it might be like kind of a nice effect. But yeah, if I'm making
yeah,
a folk
yeah,
song, I want it to sound like people can actually sing in harmony together live.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
True.
here's another one which is a little bit of a difference. So going to the 80s now, you've
Yeah.
got like Duran Duran, Pet Shop Boys, sort of a boy band, but standing very still, electronic music. Duran Duran were like, not a boy band doing moves, but just really cool. And they were
Yeah,
very
they
impactful.
marketed them. They were a band that got a bit marketing but wise with boy band. Look at these good-looking lads
Yeah,
coming by that. Going back to the Pet Shop Boys, though, they're interesting. It's a bit like a Rager as well, where you've got like a bit
yeah,
of a writing duo, where one person's doing quite a lot on the keyboard with samples and synths and stuff, and the other one's doing the front man kind of performing thing. But actually,
yeah.
it's only a duo. It's interesting.
It
It's a
is
model.
actually. Yeah, no, really interesting model. That was so unique. And I actually watched their live concert. I don't know when it was years ago, but I randomly watched it recently. And they are just standing there.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. That's their
Interesting,
model.
isn't it? Like the performance ethic, it all goes, doesn't it? From really high energy, choreographed strip
Mm.
teases, hopefully, a New Kids on the Block show, and to quite stoic things. And every boy band in the 90s and early 2000s, of course, has that moment in their set where the high stools come out and they got roving mics. They all sit on they all sit on the stool and sing the love song to the mothers.
Yeah, and
All
and
of
some
them.
most of them can actually play instruments, but like they're not allowed. So every
Yeah,
now and then when they get the stalls out, one of them might have a guitar, and it's like, wow.
totally. It must be an incredibly profitable model. Excuse me.
What it is. I mean, you can't beat the Backstreet Boys and like Westlife
I
and
mean, great
take that. I mean,
harmony.
take that. Yeah, it's just the Backstreet Boys. I don't care where you are. If, everybody, if that comes on, I don't care what
Yeah,
age you are, everybody is singing it.
yeah.
Everybody, from your great grandmother to
Also,
your,
that's with a what you've got with that because like the music snobs out there might be going boy bands. What are you even talking about boy bands? How's that like even viable? It's cheesy. And I was recently in a lecture and my professor said I don't in 30 years of working in this industry I still don't know what cheesy actually means. And I think she's got a really good point. Name check Sophie Daniels there. But it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because you might look down upon the boy band musically or whatever. But in that scenario of a big corporate recruiting and budgeting a boy band or a girl band, let's not forget the Spice Girls.
Mhm.
They've got the best writing team. They've got the best producers and access to the most
Marketing,
up to date.
marketing.
They've got, but even just in the generation of the songs, those pop songs are well crafted, and those
Oh,
harmony
they
parts.
really are.
Who was the MD on those the sizes of the show, the production side of it is huge. And that is not to be looked down upon, actually, because that's quite
No,
it's music.
no, and there's like movements in that. Like, so I know we're talking about boy bands, but let's just drift off for a little bit.
Mm.
The Spice Girls were a movement as well. That's why they were all named Baby
Girl
Spice,
power.
Scary Spice, Girl
Yeah.
Power. Girl Power was a real thing, and that was to do with marketing more than their songs. And then their songs became about the marketing. They were written for that marketing message, and that's what made them so massive, not necessarily even their talent, and they're all very talented. I don't care what anybody says. There's talent in many
Can hold a
different
tune at
ways.
least. Yeah.
Exactly, but it
Bangles,
was more of a movement.
the Bangles, Bananarama. Oh, they're
Yeah,
all coming to be our girl bands.
love it. I love
Shakespeare's.
it.
It's
Well,
interesting.
let's
Yeah.
go back. Let's go back to like late 70s, 80s. I think it's 80s, New Edition, where Bobby Brown came out of that, and that was, you know, a great band, and they're fantastic. Even if you see them live now, they're still doing the same dance routines because they did dance routines, very hard dance routines to be singing to,
And you
you
and
know,
me
and then
know,
you
of
get
course, how difficult singing in harmony can be. And so you got five voices blending together in time and in harmony together.
dancing.
That's actually a really good skill. You start getting into the criticisms around miming on stage and stuff like that. But I do, you know, if a boy band can sing one of their songs live, the five of them in harmony, I'm like, okay, they're musicians.
No, no,
Don't
100%.
don't
And a lot of the time when people have mimed, it's not actually, people don't realize this because I've done a lot of TV shows where you've recorded it earlier in the day and then you've mimed. That's not because we've wanted to, it's because their capability or the technological challenges with doing that live
yeah.
through a camera is you've got no choice. Like Top of the Pops is a British show that we grew up with. You know, they did the chart countdown from 100 to 1, and people mimed there. They didn't want to, they were told they had to, but obviously
Yeah.
technology's improved now.
And I've played on TV sets before, and you know, it's not a nice sound environment to be performing in because it's not made it's not a live show environment. It's a recording environment really that is made to look live.
Yeah,
So
well,
you know, I
exactly.
think
So
about like you
it's
know the bands on Jimmy Fallon or what like that, how the in ears they must have in order and the monitoring that they must have in order to get that, and then the feed. I've gone off on a tangent. I will backtrack. Sorry. Got a
you're
bit
good.
geeky about the tech then. Do excuse me.
No, that's all good. But I wanted to just as well talk about some other kind of genre of bands which I was massively into and am still into, is like your Boys to Men, your Jodeci. You know, I Boys to Men, incredible. They're still doing shows now, and I mean that was my
Oh.
end of the road. Go to the end of the road. That was my 13th birthday party dancing song with my little boyfriend.
That's a good memory.
It was a great memory. I mean, I don't think we danced very well. It was a bit like, you know, but that was a great memory. They were a fantastic band, fantastic band. And then you kind of had spin-offs for that because it was very much, you know, like your poppy bands, your more R&B bands, and then it started mixing with the likes of say Blue and stuff and Spice Girls, you know, because you had your
Yeah,
kind of two different areas, didn't you? A race involved with that. You know, one's soul, one's pop, and it kind of started blending, especially in the 90s. So I think the 90s had its own era of boy bands that came out of the 80s.
for
Yeah, and I'm so
sure.
glad we were around for that.
I mean, with the Bee Gees, a boy band. No, because they're a band. It's
Well, they're
interesting.
brothers, aren't they?
That too. So there's some grey areas in these definitions we've created. People that kind of fit over the both.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So, final verdict, Nat. Who is your favourite boy band?
Can I have
No,
three?
no, one. I'll tell you mine.
Boys to Men, Backstreet Boys, take that. I'm sorry.
New Kids on the Block for me. They meant so much to
I
me
love them.
when I was
I love
younger.
them.
You know, Joey McIntyre, if you're listening, you know.
I just miss them though. I've loved them, but I just miss them, if you
Slightly
know what I
younger than me,
mean.
aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like they'd gone out, they'd just started going away then. But I mean, I loved them. Like the right stuff, you can't beat that track. You got the right stuff.
Oh, I
Baby.
was in I was in a Britpop indie band by the time people like Backstreet Boys and stuff came out. So it was always, you know, having to listen
Yeah,
to
it's the
them.
Brit. Well, that's a good point. The
Because I
Brit
was in a band
pop.
with music snobs. Oh, like Blur and
Yeah,
Oasis and stuff. No, they're bands. They're just bands who are boys.
Yeah, but that was a craze. I was really weird at school actually, where I was massively into your Boys to Men and all of that, and Tupac and Biggie. But then I had a group of friends that were either a Blur obsessed or Oasis obsessed, because I always had that battle in like the
Or
Britpop magazines,
grunge,
didn't they?
yeah, or Nirvana
Yeah.
versus Pearl Jam.
Yeah,
And
I was across the
probably
board.
on the Friday night, Nat, you're out clubbing, listening to house
Yeah,
music. The
we've done
90s
an
were
episode about
great.
that.
The 90s were brilliant because I listened
I
to it
would,
all. I still listen to it
if I
all.
had a time machine, I would, yeah, I think it should have just remained the 90s forever, really.
We are sounding old, but I agree.
We are,
And
but
on that
I
note,
actually feel sorry
listeners,
for people.
yeah,
Yeah.
on that note, listeners, tell us your favourite boy, stroke girl band, and we'll see you
Yes.
next week.
See you next week, guys.